Welcome back to Journalism 102. This week we're going to be working with social media and we're going to be producing incremental reporting. If you remember, we talked about when we were discussing writing for the web, this idea that sometimes stories are reported as they happen in little bits and pieces or increments. So this happens most commonly on breaking news. There's an explosion and the reporter is at the scene tweeting out or posting to a live blog the latest information as they're learning it. It's also often used in covering a live event, so a sporting event where you're tweeting out various plays or you're posting information about scores and that type of thing to digital media. And so for your assignment this week, you're going to be producing a story in increments by using social media. So a little bit of background about social media, because I think it's important for young journalists to realize how important social media has become to journalism and the way it's practiced today. So 59.9% of people still get their news from television. So television continues to be a very dominant and important medium in journalism. 28.8% from newspapers, but nearly as many, more than a quarter of people, get their news from social media. So if our audience is getting information from social media, as journalists, we need to be putting out information on social media, because oftentimes that's going to be the way that we reach people with the information that we're gathering, the stories that we're telling. And since that's so important in the equation, there's no point in producing content that nobody actually reads or views. We need to understand social media and how to make it work for us as journalists. A little bit more about this social media news source is Facebook is still number one as it relates to social media. More people use Facebook. I know for younger people, teenagers, Facebook is sort of dying in that age group as a primary medium for communication, and Twitter actually seems to be on the rise, but Facebook is still the big kahuna of social media. There are many, many, many millions more people on Facebook than there are on Twitter. And then certainly other forms of social media, Tumblr and LinkedIn and Pinterest have many fewer people using them. YouTube is also a very significant source of social media. We don't often see it used all that much in terms of as a headline service, but certainly it is a major, major player in the sharing of content. So another piece of information, and this comes from a research project that was published on Mashable.com, 50% of people got breaking news from social media. 49% of people say at some point or another they've received false information from social media. So half of all people say at some point or another they're learning about news from social media, but about half of people say that they also have been told inaccurate information via social media. And part of this issue is that, of course, it's not just journalists using social media, right? So it's, your best friend tweeting out something that she thinks is happening. She's tweeting it out to her friends. She doesn't really care if it's right or wrong from the standpoint of, it's not an ethical violation if she says that the bar is offering, a drink special tonight and it really isn't. But that's why people tend to say that social media is inaccurate or not reliable, because it's not people like you who are working as journalists for the purposes of this class who understand why it's so important to get something right before you disseminate it on social media. And certainly there are plenty of traditional news organizations that have put out inaccurate information on social media. And that tends to be one of the big ethical discussions that journalists have around the subject of social media, is that because it's instantaneous, there's this temptation to just get information out before it's fully verified. And so that leads to people wondering about the validity of social media because, as you see in the statistic, they've been burned before. So why do we do it at all? Probably the biggest reason is that's because the audience is there. Again, more than a quarter of all people that were surveyed say that they get information from social media. So that's what they're using as a source, so we as journalists need to be there. Perhaps more important for you, especially if you're thinking about going into the field of communications, employers are actually looking for how much audience you're bringing to the table. So how many Twitter followers do you have? How many friends on Facebook? How do you use social media to help in your reporting or to get the word out about the content that you've produced? I would say beyond journalism, this is certainly also a factor and an issue in marketing, factor and an issue in public relations. And there are probably many, many other areas of employment now where social media is playing a role. Most major businesses have some sort of social media presence. And so they're more likely to want to hire somebody who gets the value of social media. So it is important for you as potential employees to start even as freshmen or sophomores in college to understand your digital footprint. And oftentimes this is primarily a social media footprint until you've been out there publishing more often. So Rachel Gold, or it might be Gould, I apologize, Rachel, is a student in our class. And when I Googled Rachel, I Googled her with the words Ole Miss because I wanted to see if somebody were trying to find her and knew that she was an Ole Miss student, what would they do? How would they find her? So they put in the keywords of her name and Ole Miss. And these are the things that pop up. Now I know this is Rachel because I've seen that video clip that's right there with the YouTube link. I don't know if she is the same Rachel who produced a story back in 2003, I'm thinking it might not have been her, about the mascot for a publication called the Chronicle of Higher Education. And you can see actually that that story has popped up a couple other times, was shared elsewhere. And so my guess is that Rachel might have someone of her same name who's also sort of operating in the area of communications. So for Rachel, that's going to be a potential issue for her. You know, oftentimes if you have a common name, there are going to be lots of different people who are online whose content may be confused with yours. So you want to begin to manage your online reputation by doing a couple of things. One would be you may want to start using your middle initial. You may want to purchase the domain name rachelgould.com and start to link all the content that is relevant to you, all of your work, your Twitter feed, your Facebook page. Put all of that on that website so that you begin to have your digital presence move higher up in search results and become the dominant Rachel Gould in this arena. So if you're not planning to go into the broad field of communications, that may not be extremely relevant to you, but I think you should routinely, maybe once a year, maybe twice a year, begin to Google yourself with the keywords that you think someone might use to find you just to see what potential employers might be seeing when they Google your name, because that is routine. I can tell you that there are many, many fields in which Googling a potential applicant is sort of step one before you hire someone. And the last thing you want is to have content come up that would reflect poorly on you and not be aware of it. Because you may want to actually make this part of your discussion with a potential employer that, I'm Rachel N. Gould, I'm not Rachel C. If Rachel C. was doing something that wasn't appropriate. So you need to sort of clue into this idea of managing your digital footprint. So I decided to try to find a few of you on social media for the purposes of this lecture. And I found Josh Barnett. I'm pretty sure this is the right Josh Barnett. Josh is also in our class. And I didn't see anything on Josh's Twitter feed that would give me pause as a potential employer. But I can tell you that, Josh right now could do a lot more with his description on Twitter. So if he's thinking about getting a job in communications, he probably wants to add a little bit more information there to tell a potential employer what his areas of specialty are, the kinds of news that he might follow, a particular skill that he has. So you might want to expand that profile description to give potential employers or potential followers a little bit more information about you and who you are. Right now, he's following a lot more people than are following him. That's pretty typical. I'm in that situation. And that can be a good strategy to follow someone in the hope that they follow you, and also to follow someone because it could be a good source of news and information. But the goal is to try to have about 2/3 as many that you are following than are following you. So let's say you have 100 followers, you would want to have about 66 people or so that you're following. So you want to kind of bring that balance down so that there are more people following you than you're following. That tends to show that you have a strong social media presence. Hard to do that, but that's where you're headed. Checking out Pete on Facebook. Pete is sort of making it more challenging for people to see everything that he posts, and that's pretty typical. So you have to add Pete as a friend. That's a good idea. But be aware that it can be fairly easy for someone who's Facebook savvy to find anything you're posting, regardless of what you do to try to keep it private. Again, didn't see anything on Pete's site that would make me concerned about who he is or what he's about. And that's what you really want to be careful about. You want to be careful, if you tend to like to take a lot of pictures of your friends and yourself at parties, you want to be careful about putting the shot of you in a bikini doing a shot, right? If you have very strong political views one way or another, as a journalist, you wouldn't want to include those on Facebook. And so what many journalists do, or many young people do, sort of have public persona and private persona as it relates to social media. So setting up a Facebook page, maybe not under your real name, maybe it's under some kind of nickname. You only make that available to friends or family members that you know aren't going to share that content. But that's a little bit more challenging and a little more tricky to keep two pages going. So one thing to consider is be thinking about when you're posting, is this something that I want a potential employer to see? For some people, this is a big burden, but the reality of it is that because of the way the world is structured today, for journalists in particular and for communicators in general, your social media presence is really not fair game for you to do whatever you want with. You're going to have to think seriously about the fact that your employer is going to look at that as an extension of their own brand. And so they're going to want to know that you're not going to put anything out there that might embarrass them. So again, why does social media matter to us as journalists? Well, it's a great way to monitor what's happening. Some people will create sort of social media aggregators for themselves. If you are someone who's pretty active on Twitter or Facebook, you might want to use something like Hootsuite or TweetDeck, which allows you to monitor all your social media at once. So here's a screenshot of my Twitter home feed, mentions, and the DMs that I received. So this kind of monitors all of that activity and allows me to look at what Fox News is reporting, or what Neiman Lab is saying, or what Washington Post is reporting. At a glance, very quickly, and I can add Facebook to this. I can add LinkedIn to this. So I can monitor all my social media at once by using some of these clients. And one of them, again, is Hootsuite. Another is TweetDeck. And they're valuable, especially once you go to work for a newsroom. One other thing I did want to mention is beyond source of story ideas, it's also a source of people who are interacting around a topic. So, getting on Twitter and figuring out who is at a breaking news situation and direct messaging that person or tweeting at that person to say, hey, we would really like to talk to you. Same thing for Facebook. There are a lot of Facebook organizations that are created of people who are very interested in a particular topic. If you go on Facebook and you put in Mississippi and autism, you're going to get back a couple of Facebook groups that are created around the topic of autism. So these are people that either have autistic relatives or research in autism. So if you were going to do a story about autism, that's a really good way to find those contacts that you might need to help tell your story. Why it matters, I think we saw during the election night aftermath here at Ole Miss that it really does make a difference in terms of what's said or what's tweeted out. If you are going into communications on the PR or marketing end of things, you have to be aware of the fact that what's said in social media can have a major impact on the perception people have of you and your brand. Certainly, Ole Miss found that out after election night. And so one tweet can have instantaneous impact. The word riot was used in the aftermath of the election here at Ole Miss. That was tweeted out by a student at Ole Miss, retweeted by a TV station in Memphis, and pretty soon it was reaching people all across the country, if not across the world. And so understanding social media, understanding the power, and using restraint when you use social media, especially as a communicator, is incredibly important. So for this project that you are going to be doing for this week, we're going to be using this particular service called Storify. And just let me click through here to Storify. And we are going to create a Storify here so you can see how it's done. It is not difficult. It is a free service, so all you need to do is sign up for an account. And once you have that account, you just simply hit Create Story. So I'm not 100% sure what my story is going to be. So I'm going to leave this location for a headline and this location for a little description of my story blank for right now. And I'm just going to come over here and put in the search box the words Ole Miss. So I clicked on Twitter, and I put in the words Ole Miss, and I want to see what kind of content is out there right now. And I see that it looks like Ole Miss has some new football uniforms. And so maybe this makes a decent storify. So Ole Miss debuts new football uniforms. So for football fans, the new look is here. Obviously, if I were doing a story on this, this wasn't just for demo purposes, I would probably work a little harder on my headline and my description, but this is really just a demonstration. So here we've got a video, which is awesome. I'm going to pull that in here, and that's going to give us a link to the video on YouTube. But what might be even better is for me to go ahead and see if I can find the football uniform on the YouTube itself, because then if I drag that in, I actually get the video. So I like that even better. So let's see what we've got here with this video. Alright, so they're showing them off to us. Good. So I like that. I'm going to keep that. And I might go ahead and now get rid of this one. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Not loving that one. So let's see if I make this even more specific now. Ole Miss football uniforms. And see what I get on Twitter. Alright, good. So there are a few people here that are either taking pictures. Let's see if anybody's commenting about how much they like them or dislike them. That would be great. Right now it just looks like everybody is just essentially sharing the news. It would be nice if I could find some comments here. All right. So here's one. We'll just say that Ole Miss unveils new uniforms and Bo Wallace is just thrilled to be here. So you can say fans are reacting to the new look. So you can go through and just keep adding content from all of these different social media platforms. So let's just check to see if anybody is doing anything. Ole Miss football uniforms on Instagram. Yeah, not seeing anything there. Let's check Facebook. Ole Miss football uniforms on Facebook. And right now, not seeing anything on Facebook. So depending on the topic, you're going to find content that's relevant or not relevant. Looks like nothing here on Flickr either. So our best sources for this particular story would end up being Twitter and potentially YouTube. Now, on a bigger topic, there's going to be a lot more content available to you. You can also add a link. So if you happen to know that there's a great picture somewhere on the web, you can link to that by adding an embedded URL. So let's go ahead and just say we happen to know that there's something good on tbo.com. I can go ahead and embed that URL into this Storify 2 and add a description here of what it is I'm adding. Obviously this is totally irrelevant, but I'm saying if you do know the URL of some relevant content, you can embed that right in here. So that's how Storify works. If I were to hit publish, one of the things that you will see here is that it asks me if I want the people that I have included in my Storify to be notified about this. So if I go to notify, the two people, so the YouTube source and this person whose tweet I dragged in, I can let them know that I have included their content in that Storify. That's a really good thing because part of social media is being social, and so you want to let people know when you use their content. So now we have this Storify that I am actually going to delete because it makes no sense. But when you create yours, you will grab the URL for your Storify. Here's one that I did on Ole Miss election night. So I would just come up here, copy that link, and post it into discussions. So what you're going to do is you're going to use Storify to complete this next assignment. So the first thing is you have to choose your story. Now I realize not all of you live in Oxford or have work schedules that are going to make this possible, and so I'm giving you some options. I'm suggesting that either the wheelchair basketball tournament, which takes place on Friday the 19th, or one of the Ole Miss softball games, which take place on the 17th and the 19th, might be really good locations to do this next assignment. The reason why is there's an event, there's likely going to be people tweeting out about this or covering this in some way, and so you're going to have access to other people's social media to help you build your Storify. You can also come up with something that you want to cover that's going to be more convenient for you, but I'm encouraging you to really think strategically. So you don't necessarily want to try to cover a city council meeting with this. It's not going to be very visual. There probably won't be a lot of people tweeting, unless it's a big controversial meeting. But let's say there's a high school game near you that you want to get to. Or let's say that there's a festival sometime this week that you think people are going to be there. A concert, something where you think that there are going to be lots of people who might be putting out information on Twitter, Facebook, etc. That kind of event is going to be okay. So if you have any questions about what you're considering is going to work, please feel free to just shoot me an email. So as part of your assignment, you're going to be using Twitter. If you don't have a Twitter account, sign up for it just for the purposes of this assignment. You can delete it the second we're done. You do have to make it public because you won't be able to use the content in Storify unless it's public content. So again, you're going to have to sign up for Twitter for the purposes of this assignment. It is free. You can do it. Longest you have to be on there is for a couple weeks because I got to grade this stuff too. While you're covering this event, I want you to tweet 5 story updates. So 5 nuggets of information about what's happening at that event. 2 photos. I want you to tweet out 2 photos that you're going to take with your smartphone. And 1 video interview about the event. So again, it's just a little brief video interview that you're going to do with your smartphone. Get it up on YouTube or use TwitVid or something like that. And you're going to bring all of that media together within 24 hours of the event, creating a Storify that will include your own tweets. So it should have these 8 elements that you have gathered yourself, and at least 3 other elements. So whether that's 3 videos shot by other people who were there and posted to YouTube, or 3 tweets from other people that were there, or 3 photos from other people that were there, or some combination of that. And you're going to create a Storify version of this story and post that link to discussions. So again, that has to happen within 24 hours of the actual event. So this idea is the closest we're going to come to getting you to feel that kind of daily deadline pressure. Anyone has questions about this? Again, you feel free to call me or email me, but I've had several classes do this. This is very doable. Don't let this daunt you. It's going to be fun, I promise. I look forward to seeing your work.